You may recall Prince William's recent visit to the States, but today on CT Style will be the second most exciting royal visit of the year.
I think so. We are lucky enough to be joined by Princess Diana's brother, who's also an author, journalist, and lord. Charles Spencer has received rave reviews for his new book, Killers of the King, The Men Who Dared to Execute Charles I. We are so excited to have you here on CT Style. Welcome.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
First off, we have to make some Connecticut connections because that's what we do on CT Style.
Sure.
Your book has a lot of areas that would be familiar to us.
Well, absolutely. I mean, just in New Haven, if you drive around, you see Whaley and Gough and Dixwell Streets. These are not great philanthropists or politicians from the past. These are real-life killers of our King Charles I, who was executed in the 1600s. And they fled here, and they're commemorated. They hid quite successfully in Connecticut. And in fact, you know, it's so bizarre. Here we are in New Haven, and in reality, that was an independent colony, and it was struck out and absorbed by Connecticut because it wouldn't hand over the killers of our king when they fled here. So you have very, very real connections here, and it's thrilling for me to drive up today and see Milford and all these places on the way here, which have real resonance from my book.
Now, speaking of the book, how long did it take you to write? Because there's a lot of information in there.
Yeah, it's a lot. You know, what I do is I did about 1.5 years of solid research, and then I write quite quickly because, you know, history books can be unbelievably dull, and I have to sort of avoid that. So I write at some pace.
You got to spice it up a little bit,
yeah,
right?
well, it's all true, but you make it. Luckily, it's a sort of international manhunt, and it has its own energy. But you have to make sure, I find, you write it quite quickly, and then you can craft it. So the whole thing took nearly 3 years, the whole process. And it's been just such fun to do.
And what sparked your interest initially?
I was on a website that's so obscure, and I'm sort of embarrassed I was on it. It's called executedtoday.com.
Okay.
And I came across the name of a guy from history I recognize. He's a very minor bit part player. And it said he was executed for killing the king. And I thought, well, I didn't know he did that. And then I looked at the people. There are about 60 men in England after we had our Civil War, which was just as bloody as the American Civil War. It was between king and parliament. The king was executed by these men who were determined that he had to go to give our country a chance of peace. So I thought, wow, that is an interesting story. It became a detective trail for me to find out who these guys were, what happened to them, and 3 of them ended up right here in New Haven.
Wow. So you put all the puzzle pieces together, and that's
neat.
the majority of the book.
Yeah, yeah. And so honestly, on all my tour of the States, I'm doing a large tour. The fact that I'm here today is the bit that matters most to me, because this is a center. Two of my 15 chapters take place in Connecticut.
It's pretty much the most significant part of his book, is what you're saying.
That's right.
We are so pleased to hear that.
Now, you know, Connecticut is fun, but you live in England, in Althorp.
Yes.
I pronounced that correctly?
Yes.
Which is the estate that you live in. And you're surrounded by 500 years of history.
That's right. Well, when I was a little boy, I used to think, oh my goodness, this is like living in a museum, you know. But now I live there. My kids are the 19th generation of the Spencer family to live in this house. And yeah, okay, you can go into some of the rooms and they're incredibly grand looking, but it's a family home, and I have 7 kids, which isn't bad for a Protestant, I always think, and they have the run of the place and love it. But again, you know, there's always new things to be discovered. And I was going up the stairway, and there was this dusty old picture above a doorway, and I'd never noticed it before, and I looked. This is while I was researching this book, and it turned out to be one of the guys who had killed the king, and it turned out he was an ancestor of mine.
Wow.
So we have
That's full
royal
circle.
blood.
In your book, in your house the whole time.
And I never knew he was there, because he was a bit part player. Yeah.
That's fascinating.
So did he have a little animosity against the king because he was royal? And
He
was trying
did.
To, okay.
He decided. He hated him, actually, and wanted him dead, and so they got together and did it. But you know, that's the joy of living in a historic environment like that. As somebody who writes history, you're always turning over something new.
And we have to ask you, your sister's just beloved by everyone, Princess Diana. What's the one thing you would like her to be remembered about?
I think the charitable side. You know, I still get people coming up to me. It's a very long time now since she died, nearly 18 years. So you've got to remember, there's a lot of people who, she's just a figure from modern history too. But I get kids coming up to me and they say, oh, I studied your sister and I always thought it was about glamour and dresses and everything. And then I realized she did really important work in the philanthropic field, and it's inspired them to do something. And I think that's amazing.
And then I'm sure, of course, she would be very proud of her sons and your nephews, right?
Fantastic. Well, I look at William and Harry, and you know, Diana died tragically young, but she was old enough to instill in them some real qualities, and I think the world can see them and celebrate them.
Absolutely. All right, Charles, thank you so much for joining us here today on
It's a real
CT
honor to
Style.
have you here.
Thank you. It's
Best
been
of
my
luck with your
pleasure.
book.
Thank you.